Welcome to Thinking Green. I'm joined today by Emma Willer, who has been working in Connecticut with 350.org, 350connecticut.org, on the upcoming climate march in New York City, and we'll be talking about climate and what can we do about it. So welcome, Emma.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Maybe you'd like to start out just talking about your background, how you got to Connecticut, and how you became involved in work advocating for a change of climate change, actually.
Sure, yeah. So I'm mainly a musician. That's what I do. But I moved to Connecticut about 2 years ago, went to some abortion rights rallies. Actually, that's kind of where I began. And of course, in 2020, I was involved in the Black Lives Matters protests. So I actually didn't really start in climate. I kind of started in different areas. But I got connected with more people around here. I met Mike Alowitz from Red Square. And then I finally joined 350 Connecticut. So we've been working on different things, and now we're focusing on this march. So yeah.
Now, it's been quite a few years since the last big climate march. I hate to ask, but what's gotten worse or more urgent now over the last 5 or 6 years?
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind is the smoke that we've been experiencing. So the East Coast has never really experienced such bad air quality like we did, what was that, a couple months ago? And I think that just triggered a lot of things in people's minds and started making them, it forced people to think about climate change. You couldn't walk out of your house without smelling smoke. And I think that's definitely what triggered this march, besides there being a UN gathering on September 20th. That's also the idea around the march. But yeah, I mean, the wildfires, if you look at a map of Canada where there are wildfires, it's all on fire. It's really scary. I was actually recently in Vancouver Island, and there's no fires on the island, but we were stuck because the one highway to get to the ferry was closed because they're doing renovations to make it more receptible to fire. You can't go anywhere without climate change being on your mind and affecting you.
I think maybe New England has been a little later to feel the direct effects than a lot of spots.
Definitely.
We visit the West Coast pretty much every year. We have relatives there. And 2 years ago, we flew into San Francisco. Our son lives in the Bay Area. And we had reservations to take the train up to Oregon, where my in-laws are. And we went to check our bags in San Francisco, and they said something like, "Oh, the bags will only go to Sacramento." And I said, "Huh? Why? We're going all the way into Oregon." He said, "Yeah, no, the tracks are too hot between Sacramento and Eugene." And not only, rail line for people was canceled, but freight rail was canceled.
Wow.
Because that was the summer that they had such bad wildfires in the Pacific Northwest, and air quality numbers that were, well, off the old charts. Maybe the new charts can record those numbers, but the AQI numbers were, I don't know, almost 500.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, we weren't there at the very worst of it, but about a month later, Mount Shasta in July had no snow on it. It was kind of scary. And then, New England just this year has been experiencing something like that.
And the floods that was more recently is also something that is fairly new to us, just the amount of damage it's causing. So yeah, I think it's hard to not think about it. It's everywhere. And yeah, and especially what just happened in Maui, of course, is just unbelievable. And yeah, it's pretty scary.
And we've known about this for a long time. I remember in the 1970s, there was awareness that we couldn't just live off of fossil fuels forever. Solar energy was starting to be talked about. Of course, much of the country went more towards the nuclear side, which has its own issues other than being, in addition to being mined and environmentally damaging where it is mined, it's not really sustainable.
Yeah.
And then I was looking it up. I was trying to remember what year Al Gore's movie, Inconvenient Truth, came out, because I think that was maybe not the first opportunity that the general public had to get an idea of how bad things were, but it was something, general consumption, and that maybe most people hadn't been aware before that. And even that was 17 years ago.
Right, yeah. It's shocking that it's taken this long. It's shocking. Because we have this crisis and we have a solution. It's not like, when the pandemic started, we're, trying to create a vaccine.
Right.
We're on the brink of extinction, and we know how to solve it. We do. We know what we need to do. But we have this small minority of people that are preventing us from solving it. So what do we do about that? That's, what I like to talk about.
Yeah, and I would like to talk about that because, how people's individual actions as, humans, as residents of the planet, of the country, how we can get together in ways that can create systemic change, because sometimes it seems like those decisions are pretty far removed from, us regular folks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm under the belief that building a movement is how we'll create that change. Having a march that brings everyone together, all walks of life, talking about the march, even if somebody's not coming to the march, talking to them about it, you're building something that's greater than yourself. And I mean, we've seen countless examples in the past of what a movement can do. I always think of the anti-war movement, especially because my housemate was very involved in that. And, it was a long battle. It didn't just, happen overnight. It was years of building a movement, and but eventually they got to the point where, I think some Pentagon leader said, you know, we have to end the war, or else the army's gonna collapse. And, you know, I got to that point, and so the war ended, and it was because of the movement that was built.
And one of the, I guess, hardest things to actually deal with is that there's denial on the part of the, you know, government agencies involved that that the movement is having any influence. But after the fact, we did learn it did have influence, and partly because it shifted a little bit because there was the movement at home, and then there was the movement that changed the hearts and minds of the military serving abroad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely easy to think, like, am I really going to do anything by joining thousands? Like, what am me as one person joining this march, is that really going to make a difference? But it's not that alone. It's what's built around it. It's the conversations that are sparked. It's the people that come to the march that start to feel empowered and start to organize more in their community. It's what's built around that really creates the change. Yeah.
Well, I think about on a modest size scale in Connecticut about maybe 6 or 7 years ago, there was a kind of a statewide movement to get municipalities to ban fracking waste within our town borders. And, you know, Connecticut's got 169 towns, and when about 50 to 55 towns passed individual ordinances, then the state passed a statute. So it takes a while to get to that critical mass, but once you have a certain number of towns, and it isn't just the individual residents of the town, it's the mayors and the town councils are all saying, you know, this policy isn't working for our city, then, you know, the state representatives and state senators, they're still pretty connected with their home community. It isn't like they're in D.C. They're, you know, their houses are still in town. And so once you get a critical mass, then you can kind of spread in all the little spots where people have gotten started doing things.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen that being a part of the Connecticut Coalition for this march. We have people from all over the state. We have meetings every Sunday, and I'm starting to see that web kind of grow bigger and bigger, and people becoming more and more passionate and getting more involved. And that's, you know, a small scale, and I'm sure that's happening everywhere. There's, I think, about 100 hubs, they said, for the march.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was just on a hub meeting or whatever, and there were more than 100 people, so that's really encouraging, for sure.
That is encouraging. So are there people, like, even coming from the Midwest and West Coast?
Yeah, as of now, they've said there's 8,500 people that have committed to the march, which, you know, I think can grow drastically within the next couple of weeks, because I know a lot of people just don't know about it still. And schools are coming back into session, so students are going to start getting organized and all of that. But yeah, they're coming from all over the country. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the details of how people from Connecticut can go on the march and be supportive, and then we can go back to some bigger issues after.
Sure. Yeah, so we're organizing a bus right now that's going to go from Hartford to, it's going to drop us off right at the march, and we're going to stop in New Haven. So that's still, you can still reserve a seat on that bus, and I think we just got the ticket price down a bit from donations, so it's very affordable. So that you can reserve a ticket on 350ct.org. But also, if you're hesitant to do that or can't make the march, just spreading the word is really important. So we also on the website we have you can download flyers and postcards, and you can even reach out to us and we can deliver them to you. And yeah, just giving them to your community and spreading the word. That's definitely another thing to do.
Now, you read the paper, and it's hard to deny that we're in a climate emergency, but I do have a copy of a flyer that I did download from the website. And this is scaled down. It's actually an 11 by 17, but my printer doesn't do that. And it does give information. It has the QR code for people to go to 350ct.org, although honestly, that's a pretty easy website.
It is pretty easy, yeah.
To remember, and it does state, like, really clearly, we're living in a climate emergency. When you've talked to people, I mean, in spite of seeing, news every week about wildfires or about record high temperatures or about, what the administration is doing to further the use of fossil fuels. Do you feel as though people are really getting the idea that we are in a state of emergency?
I think most people understand that. But I think they also feel overwhelmed. And that's completely understandable. And I think joining a march is a really great way to get a clear idea of what you can do to create an impact. And you can see on the flyer too, this march wasn't just called by one organization. It's hundreds of environmental groups, indigenous groups. We've got youth groups. Everyone is involved in this and has endorsed it. There's no one left out. You can go. The website for the march is endfossilfuels.us, and you can see all of the groups that have signed up. And there's a labor group, a queer group, just everyone, and which just proves we all know that this is an emergency. We all know that, and this is a way to show it.
And I guess ultimately it is something that we're all in together. I mean, whatever, whether we like each other or not, we're really like all simmering in the same pot together. Mm-hmm. So on some level, we do all have to figure out ways to cross lines and work together.
That's the most important thing, because it's not going to happen if we don't do that. It's not going to happen if we can't get around those little disagreements. Because, yeah, I mean, a movement is greater than that.
Now, when I think of climate change, I think of some of the other consequences of, I don't know if it's started with the Industrial Revolution. And you mentioned, the indigenous groups that are participating, and I think about, when we look historically, more than a few hundred years at how people lived, and not really using a lot of the resources, living relatively sustainably. And I think now about the other consequences of our life since the Industrial Revolution and since the the explosion of capitalism around the world, not just climate change, but pollution, which is a consequence. Where you talked about the wildfires, and also like depletion of resources that we've come to depend on. Mm-hmm. So, how do you see the connection of those issues in terms of like forging a path forward?
Yeah, I mean, to me it comes down to the fact that the government works closely with big banks and big businesses. So even though, yes, we are depleting resources and all of that, fossil fuels will always be the cheaper option and the easier option. But that's obviously needs to change. So we have to understand that, you know, it's going to be cheaper, and the government's always going to lean towards that. But yeah, I I don't know if that answers your question.
No, well, I think a lot about like things like, you know, generational warfare. When I was, you know, when I was teen and young adults, there was, you know, it was the time of the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War, and there was a real sense of my generation being disconnected from, you know, the Depression era generation. And now, and for a long time, I didn't feel that kind of disconnect. And now, you know, I think, oh, everyone, you know, the young people all hate the boomers. And I'm thinking, well, you know, there's something to that. You know, just thinking about the concerns or the realities of, you know, my generation. We had air raid drills when we were in elementary school, but like gasoline was like 25 or 30 cents a gallon at the pump. So you had these two factors. One, that it was really, really cheap to use these extracted resources. And two, well, maybe the world wouldn't last very long anyway, so we might as well like have a party while it does. And it turned out not to be a really good long-term strategy. So I, you know, personally, I feel like, you know, my generation has to somehow make up for it and at least become active and supportive.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, since being involved in this, a lot of the people I work with are older, and usually female. And there's a lot of elder groups that are endorsing this march. I don't know if it's been a recent boom, but like I've seen a lot more older people getting involved and kind of realizing like we gotta step it up. But I also feel like they have been involved and they're kind of getting a bad rap for what they've done. I mean, it's, you know, you can't, it's not the individual person to blame at all.
That is true, but I do feel that there's a certain level of generational, if not guilt, responsibility at least, to be supportive of longer range solutions. And I guess it doesn't help that, you know, the Biden administration might have some nice words to say about it, but if we look at the actual policies, not just the Biden administration, you know, we saw under Obama, you know, the, you know, pipeline and how people who are protesting for a more sustainable lifestyle were brutalized.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Biden approved more pipelines than Trump. So that's, you know, definitely something that I always like to mention. But we could talk about the demands that the marches.
That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. So the first one is to stop all federal approvals for new fossil fuel projects and to repel projects such as the Willow Project and the LNG pipeline, both in Alaska, which are just massive projects that are going to be in effect. I mean, they're going to be in project for years to come. It's not just
They'll almost be obsolete by the time they're activated.
Exactly, yeah. So that's the first one. That's very specific. The second one is a little more broad. It's to phase out fossil fuel drilling and on all public lands and waters. And the third one is for Joe Biden to declare a climate emergency. So the third one, I've just kind of looked into what does it mean if he does declare a climate emergency, because he actually has said climate emergency, like he's mentioned it, but hasn't declared it specifically. And really what it is he has access to loans or something to go ahead with, halting exports and investments, which, can be kind of, we can look into that part where it's, well, why can't he just do that now? Because all of these projects are on federal land, so he actually does have the power to change.
Yeah.
But, and then also I feel like, it is more of a symbolic gesture of declaring a climate emergency. Yeah. So those are the three main demands from the march.
As you were saying those, I was wondering if there were any calls, either in local municipalities or through national to divest from the companies that are, doing the drilling and the extracting.
Yeah, I think they do mention that, but it's definitely a little more broad of just ending the projects, and it's really, a lot of people talk about how electric car, wind turbine, solar panels, that's actually increased in the past years, the production of those, which is great, but also there needs to be another conversation on how we can't just have those on top of our fossil fuel use, because our greenhouse gas emission this year was more than the last, even though we've created more renewable energy. So it's good that they're demanding that we need to phase out fossil fuels, not just switch to renewable energy. Add renewable energy.
Well, it seems like, I'm really interested in land use and how our communities are laid out. And I think part of it, there was a film 20 years ago about the end of suburbia and how, the post-World War II emergence of the automobile created this suburban lifestyle that was very auto-dependent, and it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And we knew it wasn't sustainable a long time ago. And I do wonder, we should be living in walkable cities. Even whatever kind of car we have, it would be best if it sat in the garage 95% of the time.
Yeah, definitely.
And wasn't being used to commute to work every day.
Definitely, that's a huge thing of lifestyle change. And another thing I like to mention to people who are maybe overwhelmed by what do we do about this climate emergency is not putting it on themselves in ways of making sure they recycle every little thing that can be recycled, or making sure they compost all their scraps and biking more. Those are all great things. I think I do them. It's great. But also realizing that's so limited. The change it causes is so limited. And when you put your focus on something like a movement that's just bigger, it actually kind of relieves a little pressure on yourself, I think. And definitely empowers you and realizes if we all come together instead of trying to like focus on, what is it called? They created the greenhouse, or the footprint, what is it called? Carbon footprint.
Right.
Yeah, which was created by the oil companies to put the focus on your own carbon footprint. Just realizing it's not about that. It's about taking the power away from the big companies. It's definitely empowering to yourself.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was thinking it was sort of a strategy of the Reagan administration to put all, shift responsibility for things onto individual people rather than create systems that work better.
Yeah.
And I guess that dies hard because, a lot of us do feel guilty if, we don't recycle every scrap of metal or whatever. But each of our individual household actions isn't really going to make the magnitude of change we need.
Right, exactly, yeah.
I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit about the military?
Yeah.
Because, I went to a talk a few years ago, and it was actually Frida Berrigan, who is local, but talking about the two huge threats to the climate being like nuclear annihilation and climate disaster. And they're not unconnected, because of the impact of the military.
Yeah, I mean, the military is massive. And being in New London, I look at where they build nuclear submarines every day. I walk my dog over there. And, they put billions of dollars into that, and they're the biggest polluters. And it's puts other little things into perspective. But that's not to say that, like to mention the anti-war movement again, it's possible to organize the military. It's possible to put an end to that. And again, I just mentioned building a movement, spreading the word, talking to people, and yeah.
It seems like one important thing to remember is that there are really a whole lot more of us than the people who are driving this unsustainable way of life. And, we do get distracted and divided pretty easily, but, we have to work against that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people in the coalition, they work in factories, and they're machinists or they're UPS workers, and they've learned how to communicate with people by just kind of like showing them that they actually have more power than they think, because they run the country. I mean, workers run everything. They run the trains, they run the USPS. Like we saw with the rail strike, the rail strike, things would have shut down, and it would have really affected the country. And workers are more alike than they think. They may politically think, they're I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, but really they have way more in common than they do with, a CEO of a big oil company. It's really a challenge that we have to kind of focus on. It's like, how can we have that realization that if we come together as the working class and overcome those differences, we will have more power, and we will be able to create change. And a lot of people don't realize they're a part of the working class.
No,
yeah, I mean,
they're not really encouraged to
right.
like create solidarity.
Yeah, and they think, you know, the working class is, you know, someone that delivers my mail or something. You know, they're not realizing like, oh wait, no, I'm a part of that, and I actually can relate a lot to them. Yeah, that's definitely a challenge.
Well, I think the working class feels more vulnerable now than they have for a long time. You know, our healthcare system has never really been organized as it is in most of the rest of the, you know, of the world. But seems to be more healthcare insecurity, more food insecurity, more housing insecurity among working class people, you know, whatever area they work in, like one big family crisis and they could be, you know, out of their house or spending all their money for their house and out of food. It's really, when people feel like that kind of insecurity, it's really hard to like think rationally about long-term things.
Absolutely. And that's another conversation that's difficult. It's like, well, pipelines create jobs. So how do we talk to someone who needs that job and kind of get them to understand the bigger picture of it? Because they need a job, they need to eat, they need to feed their family. But, you know, the thing is with the pipeline, it's, you know, how is that actually impacting your community? And also it's a temporary job. It's incredibly hard work, and yeah, and that's another obstacle. But you also made me think about, what were you saying just before? You were talking about,
oh my gosh.
You sparked something, but I lost it. So
I don't remember it either. It might come up again, yeah. It might not. So you're wearing a button that says Defend Atlanta Forest, Stop Cop City. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so that's actually kind of, I was involved in another coalition, the Stop Cop City Connecticut Coalition, before I started this. And that's tied into all of this. So if people don't know what that is, Cop City is this this militarized police training center that's being built in the Atlanta forest, the Weelaunee Forest. And it's begun being built, and it's destroying neighborhoods and this like really wonderful forest that's gonna cause all these, just cause destruction to the communities around it, which are working class, majority Black communities. And so there's this big movement called Stop Cop City to stop the building of the Cop City. And there's been a lot of actions with that. It hasn't been super successful in actually stopping the development, but it has become a really big movement. And it's, you know, it also proves that, like, yes, everyone's being impacted by climate change, but also minority communities are still being impacted more. And even though, you know, Cop City, that's, you know, not climate change, but the destruction of a forest will cause heat rise and all these things that will impact the neighborhood. So yeah, so Stop Cop City is another movement, and they'll be involved in the march. They'll have a group there.
And you know, I thought when you were talking about this that the poor Black communities, I mean, have always had the trash dumps in their communities and fewer trees in their neighborhood. But I also think of the immigration, piece of it. Climate migration is something we are starting to see, that people are starting to move out of spots that could sustain life 50 years ago, and they're not so much anymore. And it seems to be going together at a time, at least in the United States, I don't know about other countries, that in general we have a much less tolerant attitude towards immigrants than we did like 100 years ago or 50 years ago even.
Yeah, yeah, that's another a part of it. Definitely, just it's, you know, living here, we walked outside, smelled the smoke and all of that, but really it didn't affect us that much. But, you know, countries around the world are being devastated because of this, and they need a place to go. And yeah, it's a really, really difficult thing. I mean, that's also another thing why we have to build not just a movement in the United States, but an international movement, because we may be able to create change here, but it's not going to do much unless we also work with everyone around the world, because they're also need to create change. And yeah, that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, it's bad enough that there are, you know, war refugees, and now we're starting to see climate refugees.
Yeah.
And, you know, the recent, you know, wildfires in Hawaii, I think might have been a real wake-up call. It's like, this is a state, now a country.
Right.
And, you know, hundreds of people are dying because they're caught.
Yep, and they're displaced now because they don't have a home to go back to. Yeah, I just listened to something about the Maui situation, how people were choosing to either burn alive or jump in the ocean and possibly drown. And it's just, yeah.
Imagine making a choice like that.
It's shocking. And, you know, that's not something we would ever imagine that we'd have to deal with. So, yeah, now those people are, yeah, they don't have a home. So, yeah, we got to figure that out.
So even in our own country, we have climate
exactly.
refugees.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know, you know, what the impact will be on the other islands or people
Right.
coming to the mainland, and who knows? I mean, we're in New England, which is, you know, even if we have, you know, hotter summers than we have, you know, in the past, it's nothing like, you know, other parts of this country.
Definitely.
You know, where you're seeing not just triple digits, but, you know, 115 degrees.
Yeah, July was the hottest month, like, on record. So, and it was mostly in, you know, the southeast part of the United States. But again, it's in our country. It's not in these, just in these, you know, far away lands. It's, you know, it's here. Yeah.
And you mentioned July being the hottest month. I did sort of a internet search on, I think, Climate Crisis March or something, trying to get some more information about what was going on in New York City. And the hits were mostly, March was the hottest month on record or something.
Yeah.
So, you know, and we are hearing people repeating, well, this is maybe the hottest year you've experienced, but it might be the coolest year you experience from now on.
Right, yeah. That is something that I have been, which is, another reason why this is constantly on people's minds. You know, you can't really escape. I was at like a restaurant, they were playing the news, and it was just one story after another, and they were all linked to climate change. And yeah, it's just, you can't escape it.
So if people are interested in going on the march, I mean, I think we have about 10 minutes left, so we don't really have to rush, but I do want to make sure that people know how they can either participate or be otherwise supportive of this action. So.
Yeah, so the march was called by this large group of organizations. So their website is endfossilfuels.us. And there's a lot of info on there. You can volunteer, you can come to the march, you can call people, whatever. So they have a lot of info there. I know Jane Fonda just, released a video about it. That's on the website.
Wow, she's still going strong.
She's still going. Yeah, which is great because she can pull a lot of people. And there's a lot of other just good resources on that website. And then for Connecticut and New England area, our website is 350ct.org. And mainly right now we're just trying to get as many people to New York as possible. And if you can't afford a bus or a train, there's still a way to get you down there. We'll figure it out.
So you are taking donations?
Yes, that's another thing. Definitely accepting donations. That's all on the website. Handing out flyers is great, and yeah, just spreading the word. And the march is taking place 3 days before the UN is having this climate summit. It's called Climate Summit Ambition. So the idea around it is that the only countries invited to it are countries that have agreed to let's see, I actually wrote this down. The ticket to entry for countries will be tangible action to keep fossil fuels in the ground.
So it's being held in the U.S., though. Are we invited?
I think we're invited, yeah. So, that's pretty broad, So that's why the march is called 3 days before that, and it's going to end, the march is going to end right outside the UN. And we're going to have a big rally and talks and all of that. And yeah, something I like to mention is we're not just marching because to show people that we're unhappy with what's going on. It's also to just share, spread this awareness and to start connecting with more people, because this demonstration is an awesome beginning, but it's definitely not. You can't just end there. So it's what we do after that as well, and the connections we make from this march. That's really important. But yeah, I mean, please, there's contact info on the website. So if you have any questions, you're not sure what's best to do, the bus or the train, or you don't want to go alone, reach out to us and we'll figure it out. There's people all over the state that are organizing, and even out of the state, Providence and Massachusetts and all that. Yeah, so we'll figure out a way to get you there, definitely.
And I did notice, though I didn't make a list or anything, that whole week in New York City there are climate-related things going on, and this kind of is the start of that, whatever, Climate Week.
Yeah, and I think on their website they list all of that. I'm not super knowledgeable about the other events, but
I went to their website, and a lot of the events didn't seem like they were big public events. They were more like, insider events. But it's kind of a synergy that it's all happening together.
Mm-hmm. And if you're interested in getting involved in a different hub, like we're the Connecticut hub, but there's also a labor hub. There's queer hub. There's an elders hub, youth hub, I think high school and college hubs, which is really important. If you go to a college, it's likely that there's a group organizing around the march there. I know I've connected with some people at Connecticut College, that's right down the street, and they're going to be taking the train in. So you can find people, that, whoever you want to join, and it's really great because, as I said, no one is left out of this. Everyone is joining the march.
Now, do you anticipate that there will be any satellite events in states, for people who can't travel to New York?
Definitely, yeah. I think there will be one in Hartford. Of course, we want as many people in New York as possible, but that's some people just can't make that happen. So I believe there will be one in Hartford. I'm sure that info will come out soon. And I also believe that they're going to be streaming it, and you can join the march that way in New York. But I also know they are working on accessibility to the march as well. So because the march will be, I believe they said a little more than a mile long. If that's not something people can do, they're figuring out a way to help with that.
This September, the weather should be good for walking.
Should be really good, yeah.
Hopefully, it won't be 105 degrees or
that would
anything.
be ideal, yeah. And hopefully, we don't get any smoke from the fires in Canada.
Yeah, I'm thinking when you said something about streaming, though, one of the maybe good opportunities we've started having since COVID is that people are much more accustomed to participating in things online and virtually when they can't do it in person, which I think was sort of unheard of 5 or 10 years ago. You were either there or you weren't.
Yeah, I mean, just organizing for this, I've seen it's just so much easier. I can quickly connect with everyone that's organizing in the country. And then even in the state, we have hybrid meetings, so we'll also, that's another thing. If you want to join our planning meetings on Sunday, the info's on the website. But yeah, even if you have to watch your kid and can't come, you can join online. So it's way more accessible to all walks of life, which is really, really great. And yeah, it's definitely since the pandemic, that's become more of a thing, and it's a really positive thing, I think.
Well, thank you, Emma. If anyone needs more information, 350ct.org. Yep. It's an easy website. And there are so many different ways to get involved. Mm-hmm. We hope that everyone figures out some way or other to get involved. Next week, I think we're going to be having a show on food insecurity in New London, which is kind of connected. And a couple other dates I just want you to be aware of. Next Sunday at Bates Woods at 1 p.m., the Green Party of New London is going to have a picnic and second nominating meetings because municipal elections are coming up this year. And on September 2nd, we'll have a just kind of a campaign kickoff date at Mi Familia restaurant on Broad Street in New London, just meeting the candidates and socializing.
That's a really good restaurant.
So if you want some Puerto Rican food,
really
meet candidates, have fun, please, everyone is welcome. So we'll see you next week, and thanks again, Emma.
Thank you.
yo, yo.